So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me. I really do appreciate it. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Brian Sanderoff. I'm a traditionally trained pharmacist, which means that I used to stand behind that pharmacy counter doing that count, pour, lick, stick, type, and gripe thing that pharmacists do. I actually owned 2 pharmacies in downtown Baltimore at one point. And after I had been in my store for about 10 years, I wanted to determine how well I was really helping my patients. So I took one category of patients, and for me at that time, I was looking at my blood pressure patients, and I said, okay, I've been giving these people medicine for 10 years. Are they healed? Can they stop taking the medicine? And I was really quite surprised to find out or to realize that no, those medicines weren't really fixing anything. Because once you're on a medicine like that, you're on it for the rest of your life. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that in medicine, what we do for the chronic diseases of aging, blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, heart disease, reflux, as we're going to talk about today, we're not fixing problems with those medicines. All we're doing is turning down the volume on something very important that your body's trying to tell you. And so if you're driving around in your car and you see that little red oil light on your dashboard light up, you have a couple choices. You can take it to the mechanic and find out what's wrong and get it fixed. Or if you want, you just take a piece of black tape and put it over the light and you don't see it anymore. Well, that's what we do for medicine for all of the chronic diseases of aging. We're not fixing problems, we're just turning volume down. And so that put me on a path to try to understand health in a different way and try to help educate people about the true ramifications of their decisions. That will come into play on today's topic as well. I'm also very passionate about this issue of reflux and GERD, GastroEsophageal Reflux Disease, because one, it's a common malady. You cannot watch any primetime TV without seeing numerous commercials for over-the-counter prescription medicines that are supposed to cut down on the acid in your stomach. And 2, it is a shining example of a mistake that we make in medicine over and over again. And it really makes me scratch my head. It makes me wonder who was not awake during basic biochemistry when we started down this path. So this story starts really when I was in pharmacy school, which was in the early 80s. Zantac was a brand new drug. And it was the first of these classes of drugs, there's new ones now, more powerful ones, that cut down on the acid production in the stomach. So I have a question for you, and that is, what happens when we ask the wrong question? And again, this is what we do in medicine, and I'll explain that in a second. Well, one of the things that happens is the answer that we get won't really help the problem that we are looking to help. And even if it does happen to be the right answer. So here's an example of that. So let's imagine that you have a roof and it leaks. So we could ask a question like, how can we stop rain from happening? And if we were actually able to invent something to stop the rain, then the roof wouldn't leak anymore. Of course, plants would stop growing and fish would eventually die, but the roof wouldn't leak. Well, this is the kind of thing that we do in medicine as well. So when it comes to reflux, what's the question that we asked in medicine? And what we asked is, what can we do to cut down on acid in the stomach? But this is the wrong question. Now, why? Well, stomach acid has some very important functions in the body. One of them is digestion. One of them is immune function. 70% of your immunity happens in your gut. This is the major way that you interact with your environment. And when you cut down on acid in your stomach, you're taking away one of the defenses from the outside world. And as we'll talk about in a couple minutes, the prescription medicines that we take for reflux actually make us more susceptible to having other problems, including pneumonia and some other things. That acid is in your stomach to actually digest the food, especially proteins. So when you cut down on the acid in your stomach, you're not getting the full benefit from your food anymore. And again, that is shown to be a problem when you're on these medicines long term. And it's actually the presence of the acid in the stomach that tells the stomach to make its own protective lining. So when you constantly are cutting down on the acid production, the stomach actually stops protecting itself. So back to me in pharmacy school in the early 80s, Zantac was a brand new drug, and the idea was that somebody was going to take it for 6 weeks to allow an ulcer to heal, which makes sense because if you have an ulcer in your stomach, the acid can interfere with the body's ability to actually make the new tissue to repair that ulcer. So the idea was you were going to take this for 6 weeks and let that ulcer heal. But that's not how it's happened in practical terms. People end up on this medicine long term, and they end up taking it not because they have an ulcer, but because they have heartburn or reflux or GERD. So then that begs the question, what would the right question have been? And here's what we should have asked in medicine, and this is what we would have asked if we were not so arrogant about biochemistry and nature and the body and how the body works. What we should have said is, what can we do to keep acid in the stomach where it belongs? Now, your esophagus, that tissue is not protected against acid. And that's why when you get reflux, you get heartburn, or you get a scratchy throat, or raspy, or you get a cough. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have acid in our stomach. It means that we should keep acid in the stomach where it belongs. So let me explain real quickly how the body and the stomach is supposed to work. This is important to understand. So here's a little picture for you. So you eat something and it comes down the esophagus and it passes through this little narrow area where there's a sphincter. It's called the esophageal sphincter, or the lower esophageal sphincter, LES. And the food drops into the stomach. Even as soon as you start smelling food, a reaction happens where the tissues in the stomach starts to create hydrochloric acid. And that's because that's important for the digestion that's going to happen from when you eat. There's specialized cells here that have certain functions. They're parietal cells that actually make the hydrochloric acid. There's G cells, which make gastrin, which is a hormone that facilitates the production of the hydrochloric acid by the parietal cells. And you have epithelial cells, that these are on the edge of the stomach. And what they do is they create or secrete a bicarbonate-rich solution that coats the stomach and neutralizes the hydrochloric acid so your stomach doesn't digest itself. That's the proper functioning of the stomach. So what's the answer to that question that we should have asked in medicine? And that is, we have to figure out why that lower esophageal sphincter, the LES, isn't closing properly and fix it. If we asked that question, we would have gone down a completely different path, and we would have fixed or addressed reflux and GERD and heartburn and all that kind of stuff without interfering with the normal functioning of the body. Yeah, all right, you get it. All right, so what are the possible reasons why that lower esophageal sphincter, the LES, is not working properly? Well, there's a whole host of different reasons why that could be. One area is physical or mechanical reasons. So obesity is a problem because when there's too much girth down there, that puts pressure on the stomach and that sphincter can't close completely. And you also could have a hiatal hernia. We'll explain more about that in a second. What other possible reasons why that LES is not working properly? Well, stress. And the issue here has to do with blood supply to the gut cells. Now, here's the reason why. Our stress response is life-preserving, and I would refer you to another webinar on my YouTube channel about stress to explore this topic more completely. But here's the Reader's Digest condensed version. When we're under stress and we go into that fight or flight, certain physiological effects happen to make sure that we can either run away or fight effectively. Some of those physiological changes are that your blood pressure goes up and your heart rate goes up, and blood gets shunted to your muscles and your brain so that you can run or fight. Well, blood is shunted away from your gut because when you're about to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, digesting your last meal is not the most important thing to do. What's the most important thing to do is be able to fight it off or run away. When we're under chronic stress, we're constantly shunting blood away from our gut, which means that those gut cells cannot reproduce properly, and they turn around very, very quickly. In a matter of days, you turn over all of your gut cells. So you get that, right? Hidden food sensitivities plays a very big role with this. Lots of times there are foods that we're exposed to on a daily basis that we don't realize we have a sensitivity to, and the result can be that that LES is not closing properly. And also an imbalance of the good bacteria. There's a whole world that lives in your gut. I always try to explain this to people, that from your mouth all the way through your body, that's a tube that really is part of the outside world that you just carry with you. Once something crosses that barrier, then it becomes part of you. But in that tube is a whole world. Well, it's supposed to be a whole world that lives in there. And again, I did a webinar about probiotics, and I would encourage you to explore that as well. But one of the issues with the good bacteria is that it allows for proper elimination. And when there's an imbalance of the good bacteria, you can't eliminate properly. And when there's a backup in the sewage system, things have a tendency to go the other way. That's one of the reasons why we can get reflux and GERD. What other reasons could there be for that LES not closing properly? Lack of stomach acid. Now, I know this may sound or seem counterintuitive, but hear me out here. If we went back to that slide that had the stomach on there in the picture. So you eat something, and as soon as you start to smell the food, your saliva starts going, and we start that process with your parietal cells and your G cells starting the process of making hydrochloric acid. Then the food drops into your stomach and the hydrochloric acid level goes up, and that's one of the signals to tell that valve to close. That's a signal to your body saying, hey, we're about to do some heavy work here. Close up the hatch so we don't damage the tissue above. And so if you've gotten reflux or GERD as you've aged, the most likely reason why, or a big contributing factor of why, is actually because as we get older, we make less hydrochloric acid. And so that signal doesn't get sent completely to close up the hatch. And so there are times when we use as a supplement hydrochloric acid, I'll tell you about that in a little bit, for people that have GERD. And it makes it go away. And if you want to test this for yourself, you may have heard this kind of like I don't want to say an old wives' tale, but it's a home remedy for heartburn or reflux is to use apple cider vinegar. And so what you do is you take about 2 ounces of water, you put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and maybe a little honey or molasses or something for the taste. You mix it up and you drink it, and the reflux goes away. And that's because you're adding acid to your stomach, and then it gets the message, close up the hatch, and the reflux stops. So that's one of the ways that you can sort of test. And then you can just take hydrochloric acid in capsule form every time you eat, and that will help. So again, that's a big problem, especially if the reflux and GERD are happening as you're aging. All right, I also want to talk about the negative ramifications of cutting acid production in your stomach, because these are really important. And as I said in the beginning, you can't watch TV, you can't pick up a magazine, you can't listen to the radio, you can't read a newspaper without seeing ads for these medicines that cut down on acid in your stomach. It's a very common problem, and it's become very common for people to treat this problem themselves. And so it's not just about going to the doctor and getting the prescription Prilosec or Prevacid, because you can get it over the counter now. And people see those commercials and they think, all right, well, I'm just going to cut down on the acid in my stomach. That makes sense. Well, there are some negatives to that. You probably can guess some of them as we talked about what the purpose of that acid is. That's what it's about. So number one is decreased digestion, especially when it comes to proteins. And so if you are cutting down on the acid in your stomach, even if you eat a pristine diet, you're not getting all the benefit from that food. You are interfering with the body's ability to take that food from the outside world and break it down into its smallest parts to absorb and use to rebuild and repair, and especially with proteins. And so here's what happens. You eat a chicken. So chicken is just a bunch of amino acids put together in a very specific way as determined by the DNA of the chicken, which makes it a chicken. You eat it. Ideally, you break it down into the individual amino acids. You absorb those amino acids, and then your body, using your DNA imprint, puts those amino acids together in a slightly different pattern, which makes you instead of a chicken. But if you don't have acid in your stomach, you can't do that. And the reason I say especially proteins is because the number one marker of aging is loss of muscle mass. So if as we get older, we start to get reflux problems and we go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, we're going to put you on Prevacid or Prilosec. That'll fix the problem for you. And again, that's not fixing the problem. It's just putting that black tape over the red light. The result is you have less materials to build and repair. And so then you can't build muscle the way you did, and you can't build your immune factors the way you did. So number one, you're not getting, the benefit from your food. Number two, along those same lines is that you need an acidic environment to be able to absorb certain minerals, in particular like calcium. And so it has been shown that people that are on these medicines long term, they get problems with osteoporosis or building bone later. Now, if you happen to be on one of these medicines and then down the road you get a bone density done and it shows that you've got some problems, the doctor doesn't look at you and say, oh, you know what? We shouldn't have you on that Prevacid. The doctor says, oh, we got to put you on another medicine. This is the very beginning of what we call the American death ceremony, where you start with one medicine and before you know it, you're on a ton of them. Also, vitamin B12 does not get absorbed as well, and it's been shown that you get vitamin B12 deficiencies when you're on these medicines long term. So decreased absorption of nutrients there. How about inhibition of the immune system? As I told you, 70% of immunity happens in your gut, and it's through your gut that you interact with your environment the most. So what you eat, what you drink goes through your gut, and little things that are in there that should never get absorbed, they shouldn't survive the trips through your stomach, start to survive the trip through your stomach. And studies have shown that elderly are more susceptible to pneumonia when you're on these medicines long term, and they're more susceptible to a very specific infection that you've probably heard about more and more recently that's called C. diff, or Clostridium difficile. That's the name of the bacteria. And when you get that, you get a diarrhea that just won't quit. And you have to be on high doses of very strong antibiotics, sometimes for the rest of your life. And we are more susceptible to that, 3 times more susceptible in some studies, when the acid in your stomach is being monkeyed with, which is what we're doing with these medicines. And again, as I said, the stomach stops protecting itself. So you actually become more susceptible to having problems like ulcers later on. And then lastly, this is newer, or studies are starting to verify this, but there are some cardiovascular effects that happen as we cut down on the acid in the stomach as well. And the story gets a little bit complicated, and it's actually the topic of a different webinar that I did, which is called nitric oxide, but I would encourage you to go explore that. But again, the short story is that the acid in your stomach plays a very important role with being able to convert certain foods like green leafy vegetables to be able to make this very important heart nutrient, which is called nitric oxide. And in fact, nitric oxide has many effects in the body, not just cardiovascular. It also affects memory and focus and brain function and immune function. And so that's all part of the big picture here. So how are the prescription medicines intended to be used, or how were they intended to be used? Well, short-term use only. And the truth is that they're really not studied for more than a year. You don't see studies of people, or as we're starting to see studies now with people on them long term, we're finding all of these other problems as well. And there were some studies where you're showing concurrent use of antacids with Prilosec really causing problems down the road. And so if you are on one of these medicines because you have reflux or GERD, there's a mechanism of trying to fix what the underlying problem is and then being able to get off those medicines. And I have a lot of patients who used to have reflux and used to have GERD who now manage it in a completely different way, so that way they're not having heartburn and, potentially causing damage to their esophagus, and they're not having to deal with the unwanted effects of being on these medicines long term. Unintentional consequences, we could call it that. And we could say, well, we just didn't realize that these things were going to happen, but we should have realized, I think, in medicine. All right, how am I doing so far? Don't forget, if you have questions or whatever, then just type them right into the box there. I must be doing an excellent job because I haven't had any questions yet. Nobody needs a clarification about things. All right, so what do we do to fix the actual problem? Well, there's a bunch of different answers for this. So as I told you, there's a bunch of different potential issues. And so we're going to go through each one of them individually. And I'll also point out to you that it's rare when I work with somebody individually that we say, okay, that's just one thing. It's just overweight for you, or, it's just the imbalance of good bacteria for you. It doesn't usually do it that way. It is a bunch of straws on the camel's back. And so what we want to do is identify which one of those straws are the biggest straws and try to eliminate those and see how things go. But it's usually a combination of a bunch of these different factors together. Margaret asked if this would be recorded, and yes, it is being recorded, and it will end up on my YouTube channel probably by the weekend. Sounds like you want to share this information with somebody. All right. So let's talk about the mechanical solutions first. First of all, obesity. Well, obviously you got to lose weight. There's a whole host of things and mechanisms to help you do that. I did a webinar about healthy and lasting weight loss. I'd encourage you to go check that one out. Also did a webinar about getting off of grains, and that plays a very big role with normalization of weight. All right, so that's number one. Number two within the mechanical solution is that thing about the hiatal hernia. Now, this can be a particular problem, and I'm going to talk about some techniques that you can use to try to make this better. But let me show you a picture and try to explain what a hiatal hernia is really. So if you look at number A there, letter A, this is a normal stomach the way it's supposed to work, and this little green tube is the esophagus, and this little pink line right here is the barrier between your lungs and heart and all the stuff that's above that and what's below it. And this tube has to come through that. And sometimes we get a little tear on either side of that tube, and that's what a hiatal hernia is. And when that happens, B or C or D can occur. So with B, what happens is the stomach actually is at a different angle, and that stops that sphincter from being able to close. Or in C, if the hernia is big enough, the whole top of the stomach can be above the diaphragm. And if it is, then again, that sphincter can't close properly. Or D, a different part of the stomach can actually be above that diaphragm as well. And again, those will affect the sphincter being able to close. And so a common occurrence that happens when you have a hiatal hernia is reflux or GERD. And again, medicine's answer is, well, let's just cut out the acid in your stomach. It's not a good answer. So what can we do for the hiatal hernia? Well, there's a couple things. There's actually a physical massage technique that you can do for yourself, and I would encourage you to just go to YouTube and do a search for hiatal hernia fix, And you'll see a video showing you exactly how to do it. But basically you're laying down and you are with your hands kind of going up underneath your ribs and then pushing down towards your spine and then pulling down, so that you're actually literally trying to pull the stomach back down so that it gets reset properly on the right side of the little membrane there. And so you can watch that video. The other thing that you can do is you can drink a bunch of water to sort of hold it in place. And actually, there was a time when reflux was known as fifth step disease, not fifth disease, which is like a viral thing, but fifth step disease. And what you would do to try to fix this problem is that you would drink some water, a couple glasses of water, and then you get up onto the fifth step, and then you would jump down. And when you jump to the bottom, there's like that sound, and it actually pushes the stomach back to where it should be. Now, especially if you're elderly or if you do not have a good, I don't want you to hurt yourself doing that. So maybe try it from the first step or the second step and see how that works for you. But I've seen that actually be very effective for people. All right, so also a mechanical issue could be a lack of peristalsis. Now, peristalsis is the term that we use that moves things along the digestive tract from your mouth all the way through the end. And we think about peristalsis on the other side of the stomach normally, and that's what helps move the food along, where the body then absorbs the parts and passes along the waste until you have a bowel movement. And a lack of peristalsis can result in constipation, sometimes severe constipation. Then there's certain prescription medicines that will contribute to a lack of peristalsis, like the pain medicines, and like opioids. And in fact, if you watch TV, you see lots of commercials these days for opioid-induced constipation. So peristalsis also happens in the upper GI. It happens in the throat and in the stomach. And sometimes that plays a role with the valve not closing properly, the LES not closing properly. So there's a supplement that's called D-limonene, also known sometimes as orange peel extract. And what it does is it helps restore peristalsis to the esophagus. And I've had some patients who have used that. The dosage is usually 1,000 milligrams a day. And you would do that either every day or every other day for a few weeks. And sometimes the reflux just goes away. And then you may have to revisit that every so often, or sometimes people take it continuously. And there's some nice studies showing this effectiveness, not just my experience with patients, but there's some nice studies actually supporting this as well. All right, Christine is asking me, can I address reflux for newborns? Yes, that's a really good one. And I'll address that in a second because it comes back to another issue that I'm about to talk about. But thank you for that question. And that is a more common problem. And boy, I hate to see medicine monkey with it then, because then where children that have reflux, infants that have reflux, they get treated with these medicines to cut down on acid in the stomach, they have problems with allergies later on, especially food allergies, and it's because we're interfering with their body being able to digest things properly. So here you have a little new being, and we are monkeying with how that being protects itself from exposure to the outside world, and they're new to it. It's even more devastating, or can be more devastating. All right, so how about other reasons? Well, number one is stress. So we have to learn to interact with the environment in a different way. And I've talked about this a lot on this forum here with my webinars, and I would encourage you to take that seriously, because stress plays a huge role with how the gut functions. And again, it's because of those physiological changes. I sit with people all day long, and when we talk about stress, they tell me it's their husbands or wives or kids or bosses or children, and then they go out and they get new husbands and wives and kids and children and bosses, and it's all the same. Nothing changes, and that's because it's not the circumstances, it's how you relate to them. And the illustration that I usually use for this is about a roller coaster. So imagine we have a roller coaster, and imagine we have two people that are going to go on it, and one of them absolutely loves it. For them, it's exhilarating. While they're waiting in line, they're looking forward to this thrill. They create endorphins. Their heart rate and blood pressure probably go up. Then they go on the ride and it's the thrill that they thought it was, and they get off and everything comes back to normal. And then the next person, for them, it's a white knuckle experience. It scares them. And while they're waiting in line, they're not contemplating, a thrill. They're contemplating their coming death. And they don't create endorphins. They create cortisol, hormone of stress. And their heart rate and blood pressure go up, and then they go on the ride, and then they get off, and they remember how close they came to death, and all those indications stay up. Well, the interesting thing about that illustration is that the ride was same for both of those people. It's not the ride, it's how they relate to it. And it's the same thing for us in our lives. So we have to learn to interact with our environment in a different way. All right, hidden food sensitivities. This is a huge one, and I cannot stress this enough. There are foods that we eat that are common that we don't even realize are contributing to ultimately that sphincter not closing properly. The most common culprits are grains and dairy and corn and soy. All of those things together. And so what we have to do is try an elimination diet. Now, I can tell you a personal story. Here I am, a pharmacist, and there's actually a store that I work at every so often for a friend of mine. And last fall, I noticed I was starting to have some reflux problems. And so, I'm there in the pharmacy, and it's real easy to just go grab a Zantac and take it, and that seemed to take care of it. And so I was doing that on a daily basis, and then I noticed that I needed 2 of them, or a higher dose, to take care of it. And by the time I hit January, I said to myself, wait a second, this isn't right. I'm not doing this the right way. And I also had noticed that over the time, my diet had gotten worse and worse. And so I went on an elimination diet where I got rid of grains completely, dairy, sugar, alcohol, caffeine. And I am not kidding you when I tell you that reflux went away overnight. Now, this started at the end of January. I remember it like it was yesterday because it was Super Bowl weekend, and changing my diet like that made it like I couldn't really enjoy the Super Bowl parties with all the food that was there. But I had had enough. And when I eliminated those things, my reflux went away overnight, and it has not come back. And here we are, 8 months later, 9 months later. So I would encourage you to really explore this. Now, I'm usually a wade into the waters kind of guy, but when it comes to the food elimination, you have to jump into the deep end, and you have to eliminate it completely. So take one of those categories, and whichever one of those in your head you said, oh no, I couldn't do that, that's the one you need to eliminate first, because that's likely the one that has the biggest part in your diet. And jump into the deep end and give it 6 weeks and see what happens to your reflux. And also see what happens to your waistline. I lost 30 pounds, by the way. And see what happens to your sleep and your energy and your mood and all sorts of other things. But specifically for the reflux, that's a big issue. So again, grains, not just gluten-containing grains, grains. So even ones that you think are healthy for you, like brown rice or whole grains, completely out of your diet. That includes corn as well. Dairy, soy. All right. And then there's the imbalance of the good bacteria, and this will also relate to that question that I think it was Christine asked about reflux in infants. And so the good bacteria in your gut plays a huge role with digestion working properly and ultimately with that valve closing the way it's supposed to. And there are many of us right from birth that do not get the proper good bacteria. Now, we were intended to come into this world in a very specific way. And when we come into the world a different way, like through a C-section, then we get a different set of bacteria in our gut, and we end up having problems. Also, when an infant gets an antibiotic because, they had a cough or whatever, and the doctor put them on the bubblegum medicine, the amoxicillin, it can take up to a year of consistent supplementation with a proper probiotic to get things back to normal. That's what studies are showing these days. Moms oftentimes will get antibiotics near the end of their pregnancy, sometimes because of beta strep and concerns of that, or sometimes just because something happened. Moms oftentimes have an imbalance of the good bacteria that also makes it harder for baby. So the biggest thing that you can do about this is supplement with a proper probiotic. And there are a ton of products out there. Some of them are not very good. The food source of things like, Activia, very small amounts of bacteria in there, and they're really not going to be helpful. And I just told you to get off of dairy, and usually they have sugar or artificial sweeteners. So that's not a good option. You really have to supplement with it. And there's a bunch of different ones. The one that I use most often is by Healthy Origins, and it's called Probiotic. It's 30 billion bacteria per capsule, shelf stable, so you don't have to refrigerate it. That potency is guaranteed until the expiration date. Many probiotics out there give you the amount of the bacteria that are in there, but that means at time of manufacturing. By the time it makes it to you, there's much less in there, if anything at all. The bacteria are engineered to resist the acid in the stomach and survive the trip so that they can proliferate in your gut the way they're supposed to. If you don't have your appendix, you're behind the 8 ball, because the appendix purpose, even though when I was in pharmacy school, we were taught that the appendix was evolution was making not needed anymore, and that's why we remove it in medicine for no reason at all sometimes. That's sort of the epitome of medical arrogance. If we don't know what something is, it must not have a purpose. Well, what it is a reservoir of bacteria to re-inoculate your gut. And if you don't have your appendix anymore, you have a harder time maintaining the bacteria in your gut. Jill is asking, what was the brand again? It's called Healthy Origins. And we sell a bottle of 60 of them for $20. And if you have reflux, I'd probably have you take a couple of them a day. At some point, you'd be able to cut down to one a day. On my next webinar, I'm going to be talking about the Essential 6, and you'll hear about how important probiotics are for that on a daily basis as well. All right. So how about the supplemental approach? Again, we just talked about probiotics. There's a bunch of here. Let's see. You got another question coming in from Stephen. I have used Prevacid and Dexilent for years now. I've recently been diagnosed with celiac disease. I was told that recently they have discovered that prolonged use of antacids can cause this, and it is not reversible. Do you have anything on this? Yes. Number one, it's a fact that a lot of us are walking around with what we would consider a subclinical presentation of celiac, meaning that a lot of us have a gluten sensitivity, even if we don't realize it, and then it sort of blooms when you don't have the ability to break things down, and that's what's happening when you cut down on the acid in your stomach. And it's hard for me to say whether it's reversible or not. What I would say is you don't want it to be reversible. You just want to avoid gluten, which you should be, but we still want to fix what's going on in your stomach, okay? And so I'm going to talk about that in a second. So all of the things that I'm talking about right now, supplement-wise, would be the things to help fix that problem for you, as well as continuing to avoid grains completely. And I mean neurotically. And I mean, if you're worried about something, whether you don't know whether it contains gluten or not, when in doubt, do without. That's the rule that we should be living by here. And the truth is that your reflux problem way back when, because you said you've been on these medicines for years, was probably the first attempt of your body telling you that those foods weren't good for you. But we didn't listen to that. We turned the volume down, and then it gets worse and worse. So you get the picture there. All right, let's see. Christine is asking me any recommendation for newborns. As far as a probiotic brand, you mean? There's a company called Jarrow, and they make one called Gyrodophilis. There's an infant one, and that's the one I'd recommend for children up to like 9 months old. And then beyond that, it's the same adult stuff. And so you should, take this Healthy Origins probiotic. You can open up those capsules. I was in the store the other day and I saw some brands, and there were some for children, and they're much lower dose. There's no reason for that. You can't overdose on these things, and we literally need trillions and trillions and trillions of these cells. And so it doesn't make any sense because someone's littler that they would get less. They still need the same amount of cells in their gut. And so that adult dose in the powder, just open up the capsule and put the powder in something that the child can consume, and then you're good to go. Hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, digestive enzymes. This is really important for two reasons. Number one, like the guy who just asked that question, if you're on these medicines already, you are already interfering with your body's ability to digest things. And so if you take a plant-based digestive enzyme, then you can start to break those the food down more completely, you can sort of make up for part of the difference from being on that medicine. Digestive enzymes also help foods move along. One of the issues with being on these medicines long-term is it starts to lead to constipation, which again, if there's a backup in the sewage system, then things are going to have a tendency to go the wrong way. And so digesting your food more completely allows for appropriate transit time of that food, and things will move along the way you're supposed to, and bowel function will normalize, and that will help things not backing up. So that's really important on two fronts. One, if you're taking the medicine, and two, to keep things moving the way it's supposed to. Betaine HCl pepsin, that is the official name of the supplement that you could take that is actually hydrochloric acid in a capsule form. So again, if you want to test this on yourself, and this is going to be more helpful for somebody that is getting reflux problems as they age, which means that it's likely that you're not making as much hydrochloric acid. Just a special note here as well, people that are vegetarian have a tendency to bring on this problem sooner. And the reason is because without the spark of having the animal proteins, the body doesn't exercise the need to break those proteins down as much, if you understand what that means. So, if you, as you're getting older, you're noticing some reflux problems, then test this for yourself. Do the apple cider vinegar thing. 2 ounces of water, tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, a little bit of stevia or something to make it the flavor, or that you can swallow it, and then drink that when you've got reflux and see if it goes away. And if it does, you've just proved what you've done is it added acid to your stomach, and that told that valve to close. And so then you might be a candidate, to use betaine HCl as a supplement. And if you were, then you would use that on every time you eat, and it would be 2 or 3 capsules. You should feel a warming in your stomach, not a burning, but a warming in your stomach, and then that's oftentimes a fix for this. Got some questions coming in. Let's see. Carol's asking, digestive enzymes help for someone who all of a sudden started having issues breaking down meals? It's important for all of us. It's actually part of the Essential 6 as well. Because of the standard American diet and the foods that we eat become enzyme poor, then even if you don't have a reflux problem, you're still not digesting food as efficiently as you should. And so it's part of what I believe all of us should be on, specifically even more important if you have reflux. And I got a question from Eric here who's saying, are the probiotics or supplements you recommending soy and corn free? My sister is very allergic to those and is probably partly cause of her reflux. Yes. All of the supplements that I'm recommending are made by companies that are sensitive to the idea of us not having those things. And so they're dairy free, they're corn free, they're soy free, they're gluten free, they're, all that stuff. They're free, except for they're not free. Little joke. Okay, Pepsin GI. This is a very specific form of zinc. It's called zinc L-carnosine, and it's a combination product, and it comes in a bunch of different names. One of them is called Pep Zinc. And there's other ones as well. And it's been shown to help get the stomach to protect itself better. And also, it's been shown to be effective against H. pylori. Now, some people, the truth is that every one of us has H. pylori. We're all exposed to it. Some of us carry it around and we don't have an issue with it. Some of us can't fight it off and it causes a problem, which ultimately can lead to an ulcer. Well, the Pep Zinc or the zinc L-carnosine has been shown by study to be effective against H. pylori as well. All right, so that's why I mentioned that. Aloe vera and licorice. Aloe vera is soothing to the esophagus and the gut. It helps that tissue repair. Just like if you had a burn and you put aloe vera on your skin, it's the same thing on your inside. Now, there are prepared aloe vera products that remove one of its ingredients. It's called latex. That would give you really bad diarrhea if you were to consume it. And so you want to not take an aloe vera plant and eat it. You want to use one of the prepared products. Licorice helps the stomach make more of its own protective lining. And so there are products that combine licorice and aloe vera and another ingredient which is called L-glutamine. And L-glutamine is an amino acid which is basically fuel for the gut cells to reproduce properly. And so there's lots of times that we use these powders that contain glutamine, aloe vera, and licorice in it to help the stomach repair and help make the need for the reflux medicine start to go away. Let's see, Chris is asking me, oh, I'm sorry, Chris, I hit the wrong button. And it was something about Metamucil, but please type that in for me again. Okay, this is a really cool one. It's called alginic acid, and it's an ingredient that comes in a pill that you chew. The brand name that I use is by Life Extension, and it's called Esophageal Guardian. Now, here's what happens. This you would use instead of like a Tums or a Gaviscon or any sort of antacid, because what it does is it creates a foam that sits on the top of the stomach contents. And it creates a barrier, sort of like a raft. And anything that tries to reflux up through that, it will neutralize. But it won't significantly change the acidic environment of your stomach. So it doesn't interfere with the stomach doing what it's supposed to do and that acid doing what it's supposed to do. But if you do get reflux, it will neutralize it before it gets into your esophagus and causes damage. So this is a tool that I like to use as people are making changes and starting to get off of their medicines. Unfortunately, one of the things that can happen when you've been on one of these medicines, either the Zantac or the Pepcids or the more potent newer ones, the proton pump inhibitors, is that when you stop using them, sometimes the pendulum swings all the way to the other side and you over secrete acid. And so this is a good tool to use for that. All right, let's see. We got some questions that are coming in. I have read that licorice has some side effects. Is it true? Yes. Licorice has an ingredient in it that can raise blood pressure. And when we use licorice to help with stress, the blood pressure raising ingredient can be taken out of it. And it's the same thing with this. So if you're using licorice to help your stomach make more of its own protective lining, you want to use a specific brand or a specific form, which is called DGL. And that's called deglycyrrhizated licorice. And so it's taking that one ingredient out that can cause increased blood pressure. I know I've seen some reports of having some hormonal effect as well, and that people using licorice can get like an estrogen effect in the body, but I've not really seen that clinically at all. Stephen's asking, what was the name of that supplement again? About the alginic acid? It's called Esophageal Guardian by a company called Life Extension. Let's see. Sarah's asking, what about drinking high alkaline water to deactivate pepsin for silent reflux? Or that is just the opposite. First of all, I have to tell you that alkaline water will change the environment of the gut, and so then you're deactivating the acid in there, and that's doing the opposite of what we want. And I have not seen any evidence that doing that actually results in alkalinizing the body as well. I know it's become very popular, but biochemically, I don't think it really makes sense. It's not the nature of the food that causes the acidifying or the alkalinizing effect throughout your body. It's the result of what happens to that food. And so just drinking alkaline water, I believe, is just going to neutralize the acid in your stomach, which is not a good thing, as we've been talking about. Jason said, is Gaviscon the same as alginic acid? No, Gaviscon is an antacid, calcium carbonate, or some other form that will actually neutralize the acid in the stomach, and that's opposite of what we want to do. Casey, not to be negative here, but I've been on Prilosec Prevacid every day for 25 plus years. Are you suggesting that dropping cold turkey and replacing that with a zero wheat diet plus trying 7 or 8 different supplements which may or may not work, that seems like a major life change, and I feel fine now as long as I take the RX daily. What is my motivation? Well, Casey, how about cardiovascular disease? How about stomach cancer? How about lung cancer? How about osteoporosis? Those are the things that happen long-term being on these medicines. And so, no, I'm not suggesting that you stop at cold turkey. What I'm suggesting that you do is you create the environment so that that need for that medicine is not there anymore, and then you start to cut down on the medicine. And so typically I'll have people take some supplements, make the changes in the diet, take seriously the stress and the other part of it, and then lose weight if that needs to get done as well. And then you start taking the medicine every other day, or every third day, and every third day, and then every fourth day. And so you gradually go off of it, and you convince yourself that you just don't need it anymore. All right, and so here's Chris's question again. Does Metamucil have any negative side effects on your digestive system? Metamucil is not a great product, and I always tell people, try this test. Make your Metamucil, mix it up in the glass, and then pretend like the phone rings, and then you get distracted for half an hour and come back to your glass and see what happens. You could turn that glass over and nothing will come out. It's a big gel plug. And the same thing can happen in your gut. And so it's much better to use fibers that aren't going to do that in your gut. If you need extra fiber, that's important, but that's not a great one. And then oftentimes it has sugars or artificial sweeteners in it as well. There's a fiber that's called clear fiber that will not change the consistency of anything that you use. It won't change the taste. You can cook with it. It won't gel up like that, and that's a much healthier one for you. And oftentimes, if you're on the probiotics, that will keep things moving the way it's supposed to. All right, and then the last thing supplement-wise is calming adaptogens. These are herbs and nutrients that will calm the adrenal response to stress. A whole bunch of different ones: ashwagandha, schizandra, arctic root. There's a bunch of different ones. My favorite formula is one that's called Cortisol Calm by a company called Pure Encapsulations. That's one that has a combination of ingredients that will really help calm things down. And again, that will play a role with things. Let's see, got some other questions. Oh, so just to recap, and then I'll go to the last questions here. So for reflux, one-to-one, number one is we have to ask the right question. We don't want to cut down on acid in the stomach. We want to keep acid in the stomach where it belongs. If we can fix the actual problem, then this problem can go away for good instead of having to be on a medicine for the rest of your life, which then has other unintended effects. And the supplements can be helpful as well. All right, so let's see. My doctor did an endoscopy for me and found that I have a slight inflammation in my stomach lining. How can I heal it naturally? All the things that we talked about, specifically glutamine, aloe vera, and DGL, that form of licorice. There are different powders. The one that I use most often, there's one called Glutagenics by a company called Metagenics. And there's other products out there as well. That and paying attention to stress, because stress plays a big role with that, because again, when we're under constant stress, then we're shunting blood away from our gut. Well, everybody, thanks for joining me. I really do appreciate it. If you have any other last questions, type them in now, and I'll try to get to them before the end of the hour. That screen up there just shows you on my YouTube channel the archives of all the different webinars that I've done: stress and weight loss and sleep and cholesterol and osteoporosis, and there's dozens more. Literally, there's 40 or 45. And I mean, we've had hundreds of thousands of views of these videos, and I'm really proud of the fact that people are working to educate themselves to try to help their body work differently. Okay, what about the LEAP MRT food sensitivity test? Okay, food sensitivity testing real quick. I don't think that the testing is sensitive enough to catch things. When testing was first started, I was a little skeptical about how it worked, and so I had my blood drawn and I sent it in under my name. And then a week later, I had my blood drawn and I sent it in under a different name, and the results came back different enough to make me really wonder what we're testing there, and if we understand either the testing sensitivity isn't great, or we're not necessarily measuring what we think we are. There are times when I think that people are showing up as sensitivity to something just because they had a lot of it in their diet recently. And so the only way to know for sure is to eliminate the foods completely from your diet for a period of time, usually 6 to 8 weeks. That's the only way to know for sure. And I would encourage you to do that as well. All right, Jill says, thank you. This was great, easy to understand. I'm glad. You are welcome. Christina said, great info. Thanks so much. Very good. What did she say? Sorry, can you spell out the supplement for infants? It's called Baby Jarrow, Jarro -Dophilus. And it comes in a powder. It needs to be refrigerated. You know, I've used that in my practice for years and years. Larry said, thanks a lot. Let's see, Patrick. Oh, sorry, Patrick. I think I deleted yours inadvertently, how can we find your YouTube channel? So if you go to my website, wellbeinggps.com, on the front page, you'll see a little YouTube thing. Just click on that. It'll take you right to the YouTube channel, or just go to YouTube and do a search for Wellbeing GPS, and you'll find it there. Whole bunch of different ones, and if you ask a question on that, maybe you'll be famous and you'll hear it on the thing. Why do certain foods like chocolate or orange juice make reflux work? We can have specific sensitivities to specific foods as well as those broad categories, and those are some of them, although lots of times it's really what goes along with those foods. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, I'm allergic to orange juice and it makes my reflux worse. But when do they have orange juice? When they have breakfast, when they're having those grains, whether that's cereal or toast or whatever. So that's what I've found. Stephen, any thoughts if we already have Barrett's? Yes. Take everything I said very, very seriously and fix that problem. Get that valve to close so that you stop doing damage to the esophagus, and then the esophagus can heal. And then again, the licorice and the aloe vera can be very helpful for that. And last one, Patrick, I've heard that an all raw diet works wonders and heals most ailments like heartburn, skin issues, allergies. What are your thoughts on this? My thoughts are that yes, I've seen that as well. Long term, for me, it's not viable because you don't get enough protein, or I feel you don't get enough protein. So unless you're supplementing with protein, and because, if you go on an all raw diet, think about it. The one thing that you're probably not going to eat raw unless you're just eating sushi all the time is your protein. So that becomes a problem. Everybody, thanks for listening. I really do appreciate it. I hope you join me again for another webinar someday. I hope you found this useful. Do not be shy about getting in touch with me. Right through the website, wellbeinggps.com. You can email me, or my toll-free number's on there. You can call me anytime. And if I'm with a patient or busy, I will get back to you. I promise. Everybody, thanks. Have a great day.